Imagine if you could just click your fingers and anything that you wanted would appear right in front of you right now. What would that be? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. You see, that might seem a little bit far-fetched, but let me kind of break this down for you. The only reason you can't do that is because you can't allow your brain to transcend the constructs of your current realities, which I know is a pretty heavy idea to start a video with, but that is the truth. What I want to talk about in this video is how you can create anything you want in your life faster and easier than you probably thought ever possible using science. So let's go on a little bit of a journey together. You see, everything in our known universe is made up of atoms. You are made up of atoms, your table is made up of atoms, everything around you is made up of atoms. This is probably not news to you. And you were probably taught, like I was taught, that atoms are mostly negative space. That's right, you have this little atom and you see this picture of a kind of a ball in your mind, and you might know that there's some protons and neutrons and electrons that fly around in that little ball as well. And then what we're kind of told in school is that all of this kind of space in between. Now that space of the nothingness is 99.99999% of everything, which is pretty wild. And up until recently, I was really perplexed by this idea because I was kind of thinking, well, if we're 99.9999% nothing, why aren't we just passing through ourselves and all of this kind of stuff? And what it actually comes down to is the fact that the space in between all of the things is not nothing, it is something. This something is kind of known as the field. Now, there are a lot of different names for it, and people are still trying to work out exactly what that is. But this is in the realm of quantum science, quantum theory, and quantum mechanics. They're deeply digging into this topic right now. What I find most fascinating about it is to conceptualize how this works, and then how you can actually start to leverage this idea to really get what you want. Now, we're going to be talking about a wide range of topics here. My goal is to give you an understanding so you can conceptualize this science and this process so you can create anything that you want. So the easiest way to think about it is imagine a fish. A fish is in an ocean. When the fish is in the ocean, it doesn't know that it's in the ocean. It's just thinking, okay, I'm in this space, everything around me. We see it as water. To it, it would just be, you know, the space around it. It can go up and it can go down, it can go sideways and back to front, all of this kind of stuff. Now, to us, the water has a certain level of density, but to the fish, it doesn't. It is just the water. Now, imagine if you could see everything that was in between all of the atoms and molecules that exist right now, and just imagine it. Imagine it as some kind of like jelly type substance where you could hit it and a vibration could run through it. Kind of like how when a whale makes a noise, it can be heard hundreds of kilometers away. That's the same kind of idea, that the frequency that the whale creates can transfer through the density of the subject that is, in that case, the ocean. Now, we can do the same thing through the field. Now, again, there are a lot of people talking about different ways to describe this field. Some people say it is the Higgs field. Some say it is the unified field. There's a kind of a few different kind of variations around the theory on this. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to call it the field, and we'll kind of leave it at that. We can dig into the mechanics of that maybe in another video. But once you actually start to realize that we are not in fact surrounded by nothingness, we're in fact surrounded by somethingness. In fact, we are surrounded by oneness, a substance or a thing or a field that connects every single atom and energy in the universe, then you start to realize that actually we can maybe influence the things around them. Because if all we are is frequency, which is fact, if all we are is frequency and everything that we do is based on energy, and we are in a substance which also resonates on those frequencies, then we can actually start to influence things at a distance. Just like when a whale makes a noise, you can hear it a long way away because it is transferring through the fabric of its substance. So this whole idea that you can manifest things actually came into popularity with a movie called The Secret. Now, the thing about The Secret is it's a kind of a nice idea, but it's a bit light on in detail, and quite frankly, I think it's kind of wrong in many ways. You see, The Secret kind of gave us this idea that you could just wish things into existence, which to some degree has merit, but there's a little bit more to it than that. And in order to understand it, you really need to start to go down to the atomic level. You see, an interesting thing happens in the field. The field is effectively frequency. And the thing is, nothing in the field has form. So what science has discovered recently when they were actually studying the field is that our perception specifically creates reality. And this is what's called the observer effect. They were actually studying, I think it was electrons at the time, and every time an electron electron in the field, it would appear in a slightly different place, in a slightly different configuration, and it was just making all these kind of random things which they couldn't actually work out. What they actually worked out is that it was spontaneously forming only in the moment that it was being observed by the observer. And then the moment it wasn't being observed, it would collapse back into non-existence. And so everything in the field is effectively frequency or is a wave function. If you want to kind of put some kind of thinking around that, it's the same as the frequency of a radio or anything else. It's a waveform, it's energy, it is frequency. And what they actually discovered through that observation is that when they looked at it, it would collapse into a form and then collapse out of a form. And that observation, that turning something from frequency into reality, has a scientific term, and it's called collapsing the wave function, which is really interesting to me, at least. Another way to think about this is thoughts are not nothing. Thoughts actually take about 500 milliseconds to form, and they have a noticeable, measurable electronic charge. So your thoughts are electric, and they have an energy and a resonance and a frequency, and your emotions are magnetic. And those two things that come together to create an electromagnetic field. And so you're literally creating these energetic vibrations that are flowing into the universe, which are interacting with the field around you. Now, just in the same way that everything's frequency, you may be sitting in a room at the moment, and aside from hearing my voice, maybe there's nothing. But I can guarantee you that there is music in the room around you. And you might be thinking, hang on a sec, what do you mean there's music in the room around me? Well, the fact of the matter is there probably is. If you got a radio and turned the radio on and tuned it to the right frequency, you would probably pick up music. Now, you could easily say the music wasn't there was nothing, there was no sound. I picked up a radio, I turned it on, magically there was music. But here's the thing, the music was already there. The music already existed all around you. You just hadn't tuned anything to the frequency in order to receive it. Now that is pretty interesting if you start to dig into it, because all you need to do to access any of the things you want that already exist in all number of universes at all time is to tune into the frequency of those things, which is, I don't know about you, which is pretty mind-blowing. So quantum mechanics suggests that every possible variance of every possible thing that ever could exist, every alternative reality, every past, present, and future, and everything exists simultaneously in a superposition of states known as the many worlds interpretation. So basically, everything already exists. Everything you could ever want, everything that ever potentially could be. That time you said no to something, you also said yes to it at the same time. Everything that did not, and everything that did not, did. Every single thing has happened, which is a lot to get your head around. If you can kind of conceptualize this superposition of states, this omnidirectional, omni-universal condensation of things where everything simultaneously exists, then you actually start to then get to question, well, what is your current version of reality, and how can you transcend some of these states? And the way that you move through various versions of these existing realities is through your thoughts and your emotions and the way that you perceive things. Because if everything already exists, then all you are choosing is which one of the realities you want to experience. Now, back to the observer effect. Science has already proven that you can actually specifically and literally form your actual local and non-local reality through the way that you perceive everything. And so you have this capability to specifically and actually literally manifest what you want around you. Now, the term manifest gets thrown out as some kind of hippie woo-woo nonsense, and I'm pretty science-minded, so I like to be open to these ideas, but also like to know how they work. Now, if you change manifestation to create, then it kind of like comes across a little bit easier to understand. Now, the way that you can create anything you want is actually to think about how can you resonate on the frequency of that thing, which is back to something I was mentioning earlier. How do you resonate on that frequency? And so something to think about here is if everything is a frequency, if everything has a resonance, and if everything already exists, and we're all stuck together with this big kind of cosmic glue called the field, and we can communicate through that field to attract anything we want through frequency, then how do we do it? Well, I'd like to talk to you about tuning forks, which might seem like a bit of a random segue, but if you're not familiar with a tuning fork, it's effectively a steel rod that's got a fork on the end of it that is tuned to a specific frequency. So it could be a F sharp or an A minor, for example. Now, what is really interesting is if you get two tuning forks that, let's say we get an F sharp and an A minor. We have two tuning forks, but they're tuned to different frequencies. And we hit the F sharp fork, what is going to happen to the A minor fork? Probably nothing, actually, because it's not going to be resonating at the same frequency. However, if we get two F sharp forks and hit one, the other one will start to vibrate at the same time. That is because they are tuned to the same frequency. So the idea of the law of attraction or manifestation is actually really about how do you get on the same resonant frequency as the things that you want. Now, this is really hard to get your head around, which is actually why it's really hard to do. It might seem easy, but the thing is we sabotage our own thoughts. else. One of the things that I have learned, and believe me, I am no master at all of this. I am just a student that is on the journey who has seen enough evidence to know that it is true. But one of the things we need to kind of get our heads around here is the only way that you can actually resonate at the same frequency as the thing that you want is to actually know that it is already true, which is a really hard concept to get your head around when you don't specifically see it in front of you, because what you're questioning is the actual construct and fabric of your own reality. Now, if you can actually believe truly, deeply, and know that something is true, then it can exist simultaneously and instantaneously in your life. The problem is, again, that we have a hard time breaking out of our current construct of reality and the way we perceive the world. So the quest here is to actually start to deconstruct how we see ourselves showing up in the world so that we can connect more deeply with the field and get everything we want faster and easier and better. Now, again, I'm no master at this, but I've actually certainly started to see this play out in my own life. There have been many times where I have put conscious thought and effort and energy into something to the point where I believe it to be true, and I no longer question whether it will happen for me because I already know that it is happening for me. I just haven't necessarily received it yet. And then spontaneously, these things happen. Everything from hitting certain revenue targets in the business, to flying on a private jet, to, in fact, early on in my life, when I first wrote down a bunch of festivals that I wanted to work at when I was younger, and then put that bit of paper aside and went about my day, and then years later I ended up working at all of them. I've seen this map out through my whole life, and my quest now has been to actually learn how to control it and how to drive it so that I can actually create almost anything that I want. And again, I know this can sound a little bit crazy if this concept is just new to you for the first time, but this is based on science. This isn't based on some kind of hippie voodoo type stuff. This is actually based on quantum mechanics and quantum physics, which is why it is so interesting to me. And so a natural question then is like, how do we get to a state where we can know something is true so that we can receive it faster, easier, and better using this power of kind of quantum mechanics and quantum physics? Well, it comes down to creating an emotional connection with that being a fact. So if you think about a past memory, just imagine a vivid memory. Maybe it's a wedding that you went to, or maybe it was a birthday, or maybe it was some moment. Just think about that for a little moment. Now, if you're really thinking about it right now, I'm willing to bet that you actually lost track of the room around you. You would have gone into your mind's eye, you would have started seeing the vision of that being true, you probably would have felt some of the emotions you felt when you were in that moment, all of that kind of stuff. And in a very real sense, the reality that is in front of your eyes would have disappeared, and you would have been seeing that vision of the past. Well, you can do the same thing by creating memories of the future. And this is something I learned from Joe Dispenza. I highly recommend you check out his work as well. If you can create future memories that can appear as true in your own mind as your past ones, you can create that reality just as easily as you can have lived that past one. Everything exists in a super state where everything all exists, all simultaneously, in all possibilities at all time. The future memory, or that possibility of where you want to be, is just as real as that thing that you actually experienced in your past. These are all just ideas. And so we start to then get to work out, how do we transcend where we want to go? So thinking about that and thinking about how we jump between these kind of states, it's actually just a case of really dialing into what that potentiality is. So think about it like this. The thing that you want already exists. All you need to do is draw a map in your mind in order to receive it. That map just needs to be a map of believability, which you can actually do through visualization techniques. Now, the easiest way to do that is to craft a memory of your future state that is so vivid, that is so emotionally real, that you start to actually see it in your mind's eye, and you no longer are convincing yourself of its reality. It becomes so true to you that it already exists. So the easiest way to do this, when you're starting to actually go, okay, what does this look like? Give me some practical guidance on how do I do this. The biggest mistake people make when they're thinking about how to try and create this kind of stuff in their own life is to do goal setting, which is like, I want $1 million. Well, that's going to get you nowhere, because just because you want it, it doesn't mean anything. You need to know that it is true. You need to believe it to be fact, rather than some desire that you want to have. Another thing that I'll say is, I will get $1 million in the next 2 years. Well, or I will get $1 million. These time constraints that you're putting on it are just fabrications in your own mind that are actually delaying your ability to receive your goals. I was doing a meditation recently by Deepak Chopra, and there was a fantastic question in there, which was, how long does it take for a dream to come true? And the idea is that most people put these constructs in there and they say, well, I'm currently at $0 and I want to get to $1 million, and therefore that is going to take X amount of time, and it's going to require that I do all of these things. And then if you are actually in control of the way you perceive your own reality, the process of you doing that, you have literally just decided what are all of the obstacles and roadblocks that you need to face in order to get the thing you want. What if you just didn't imagine that you needed to do that? What if you could just believe that it was already true, that you could receive? Now, again, the knowing is the hard part, because you might be sitting there looking at your bank account going, but it currently has $0 in it. And that is true in the current version of the reality that you choose to participate in. So the only way you can start to change this kind of thing is to start to change the way that your brain works. Now, in my experience, to create things, I like to go through things in baby steps. If I was to turn around and say, I have $1 billion right now. I don't have $1 billion right now. And in order for me to cross the precipice of believability to get to a state of knowing, that would be really, really difficult because I'm like, I'm a long way from having $1 billion, in fact. Now, if I went through some smaller steps, my company generates X dollars in revenue every month. I've literally done that exercise. Look at the way I constructed that sentence. The company makes, present tense, over X revenue every month. Now that presupposes that it is already true, and I'm just telling someone, did you know that my company makes over X amount of dollars every single month? That's the kind of statement that you need to create to be able to create the believability. And as you start to walk through that, if the valley of believability is not so large that you can not believe it, then you start to move through these things quicker. And so what I've actually learned is to speed up, you need to slow down. Maybe if I was better at this, maybe if I had more skill, maybe I could move faster, but I'm trying to work with how can I navigate this in the best way that I can. So my advice to you would be to start with some small things. Start with some small things and then grow from there as you start to build up your skills in understanding how to navigate this piece of information that I'm giving you today. Now, another thing that you should really, really do is tie an emotion to that. So you might say, I have more money than I need to feel any desire I truly have. Because of this, I feel empowered, enriched, and fulfilled, knowing that I can take care of my family and be the best version of myself. Well, that suddenly wraps an emotion up in it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, thoughts are electric and emotions are magnetic, and together they create an electromagnetic field. And that electromagnetic field can actually be measured several meters away from the body. So this is a real thing. This isn't, again, some kind of like aura or something like this. This is a literally measurable thing that you can create and you can amplify. And as you push that electromagnetic field out into the quantum field or into the field, you can then start to more easily and more readily attract things. Now, a thought by itself is impactful. An emotion by itself is impactful. A thought and emotion wrapped together actually start to magnify the intention behind the desire and allows you to get what you want faster. Now, the trick here as well is to commit and let it go is a really big thing, a really hard thing to do. And this is the ultimate dichotomy of the universe. Everything simultaneously exists and does not exist. Every potentiality exists and is not. You both are and are not all at the same time. And in order to receive the things that you want, you need to be able to craft a pure and deep and emotionally driven intention and then let it go and release all attachment from receiving the thing. That only comes with knowing, because you're not yearning for something that you know to be true because it's already a fact. And so if you can get to that state where you can deeply emotionally connect with this thing really passionately and it's meaningful and it's highly connected to your values and there's some substance to it and it is the thing that you really truly want, get to a state where you are so in the zone with it that you believe it to be true and then release all attachment of that ever happening, which is very hard to do. But if you can do that, that's when things start to appear. And I encourage you to try this out for yourself. And I encourage you to develop a daily practice where you spend the time to actually work through the things that you want. Now, in the first instance, it's not going to be easy because you probably don't know what you want. A lot of people don't ask themselves the question, what do I want? What do I want this version of my reality to be? They don't take the time to question that. And I would encourage you to at least start with that and lower your expectations. Because if you think that you're going to wake up one day and you're going to write down on a bit of paper that I have $100 million and then spontaneously it's just going to appear for you when you haven't spent the time to do the work to develop the necessary skills and openness for that to be true, then you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. But I can tell you, as someone who's been practicing, learning, nurturing, researching this for the better part of 5 years now, it only becomes more true the deeper you go, which is very interesting because a lot of things that you start to learn about, the deeper you go, you actually get to a wall of understanding where you're like, okay, I've kind of learnt this thing now and that's kind of it, right? It's only incremental gains from there. But the more that I deep dive into this, the more that I continue to research it year after year, the deeper and more real and more true it becomes, and the more backed by science it becomes. Now, I can guarantee you that if this is the first time you're thinking about this, it's going to be a real hard concept for you to get your head around. So again, I encourage you to just get a daily practice, preferably in the morning. I like to do it straight after I wake up. I sit down and I write my vision. I encourage you to do the same. Ask yourself, what do you want? And then start to write it out in present tense. I am, I have, not I will. watch what starts to happen in your life and watch you start to get more aligned with the things that you want in your life. I hope that this is helpful. And if you do any of these practices, or if this meant anything to you, or if this was useful, then just let me know in the comments. And if you want me to deep dive on any of these specific topics, then I would be happy to. I wanted to record this video as a kind of high level summary, a high level overview of kind of how this process works, so that we can then start a conversation, you and I watching this video, around going deeper into this and start to pull on that thread, because it is my commitment to try and help as many people as possible live the life that they want. And I believe that you can create that life by pure intention and effort that goes along with that, because you need to take the required actions to align yourself with the energy of the universe that you are trying to create and the reality you are trying to create. But if that sounds like something you're interested in, let me know and we'll dig more into it, and I'd love to do that with you. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you check out other videos on this too. And remember, ideas without action will get you nowhere. So go on and make it happen. We'll see you in the next video.